Hello, V.
Okay.
Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Hi, Shan. Thanks for having me today.
Sure. I'm excited to talk to you. And you have a very interesting story that you're here to share with us and to tell about your, travels and how you're living life in a van now as a van life nomad, traveling Canada and, thereabouts with your beautiful dog, Marco, and what it's been like for you to go on this journey and, reach different levels of self-actualization and self-knowledge and self-deepening and just spending a beautiful amount of time in nature. And it's a really wonderful story. And, people can find it in your book. It's called Living Through Alchemy, and it's available. We'll put links in the description, but it's a really great read for anyone who's interested. And so let's sort of start at the beginning. How did you make your way to this path of becoming a van life nomad?
Okay, so I was actually interested in kind of minimalism and simple lifestyle. And at the time I was living in Vietnam. So the backstory of that was I wasn't really interested in living a normal corporate life anymore because of all the crumble and the stress that it happened to me in the US.
Mm-hmm.
So back then, I had a life just like everyone else, right? Just a normal life, living 9 to 6 job. I went to university, graduated, got a job, got a really good job in Boston. But I wasn't really happy with it. I was just really stressed. And the day-to-day life was I was just questioning, what the heck am I doing? Why am I here? I wasn't happy about anything with everything that I was doing at the time. And my boss was constantly harassing me. And because I was in the US as an H-1B worker. So as an H-1B, you are only in the country per employment.
Mm-hmm.
So it's your employment status has to be dependent on employer. So in a way, it kind of allow the employer to take advantage of you and to do whatever.
And what exactly were you working as at the time?
So I was working as a clinical engineer in a hospital in Boston. And it was kind of related to my field, but it wasn't really into my expertise because I was more into more like product development for medical devices and research, research and development. But my task was more about doing networking and hooking the lines for routers and switches in the hospital, which was super boring for me and I couldn't stand it.
Yeah, I'm sure it sounds great.
Yeah, and it was I wasn't really interested in IT and computer either because when I was in grad school at Cornell University, I was very interested in product development, and we actually had a really cool prototype for treating TMJ, like pain management for TMJ, and we were very successful at that. And I kind of want to continue the project and kind of go on the same train, but as an H-1B worker, it's very difficult to get a job. Not just it was not just because you have to do everything according to your job, but more you have to do what the employer wants you to do. So it's very difficult to get what you actually love to do. So at the time, I was interested in medical devices and also cell therapies. But I couldn't really get, I thought the job would be really interesting because I was working with medical devices, but not technically on the product development, more like just kind of like monitoring them, just
Right.
hooking the cable lines and more like dealing with the switches and stuff. And so the job was really repetitive and really boring for me. And not only that, like having a difficult boss, but just kind of like everything was putting too much pressure and too much stress on me. And the fact that because I didn't love my job, then they kind of pressure me, if you don't do it the way that we want it, like you may lose your job. And if I lose my job, I would have to go back to Vietnam because I don't have the visa to stay in the US, you know. So at the time I was already in the US for like 12 years because I came there for high school and I stayed for on the way into my graduate, and in the between I was also doing some other jobs as well. And so, I came to the US when I was 17 and I lived there for like 12 years. So I kind of consider it as my home.
Hmm.
So I was kind of like carrying on the the belief of like the American dream, like having like a stable life and the white picket fence house.
Yeah.
Yeah, and along the way, I actually thought that if I keep getting more degrees, I keep getting high degrees, higher status, and just please everyone, please all my bosses, they would give me my green card status, which to me at the time that was freedom.
Hmm.
Um, I that was the status that I was chasing, but underlying of it all, it was the freedom that I wanted. And the reason I wanted that freedom was because um, I realized that I wanted to travel. I wanted to travel the world. And that was my dream since childhood. Um, but I couldn't do that as a Vietnamese citizen. So when everything was kind of starting to crumble, I happened to read the book The Alchemist,
Mm.
and that's kind of like reignited my passion for traveling. And not just that, I actually met a nomad in person in Boston.
Oh, wow.
I
Divine
was like,
timing.
yes, exactly. But he happened to be a British, and he had already traveled for like 6, 7 years at that time,
Wow.
just hopping around the world. And he was sharing so many cool stories about traveling. And I'm like, this is what I really want to do. And so eventually everything did fall apart for me in the US, and I was devastated because I was like, I don't know where I would go from here. Like, and I just keep questioning, what is really my life purpose? Is it it? Like, I, like, deep down, I felt like there was something more for me. Like,
Hmm.
I just felt like the life that I lived back then wasn't really authentic. It wasn't really me. It was more like just do everything that everyone asked me to do. Just keep carrying on. Just keep climbing on the corporate ladder, and getting to the green card, like, because you have to stay on H-1B visa for 6 years in order to get the green card if they like you.
Right. It's such a crazy system, right?
It is. And I was like, I have to get everyone to like to me. And I hated my job so much. Um, and so eventually I just couldn't carry it anymore. And the reason I did it was because um, not only because I wanted that freedom, but I also wanted to make my family proud. And, I also wanted to have some kind of status, because it's kind of cool status to say like, oh, I'm a engineer for like this hospital,
Yeah.
because it's a very prestigious hospital in the US. And so when all of that started to fall, like, I questioned a lot about my life. And I was like, I just told myself, if I could redo my life differently, like what would I do? Like,
Hmm.
what is it that I really want right now? And so when that book of The Alchemist came to me, not only it reignited my passion for traveling, but it's also get me to question my heart. Like, what is it that my heart actually desire? Like how can, and I learned so much about listening to my desire and follow it and having the courage to follow it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a really hard thing to do, right? Because very often we do get stuck in other people's dreams and expectations of us. And whether that's our family or our friends or the society we live in, it's very easy to just be like, well, yeah, this is what I got to do. This is what everyone tells me. You know, they teach it to us at school. It's like you have to
You know, it's
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's like what you have to lose, kind of like everything. When I get to like the rock bottom, I lost everything that I had in the US. Um, that was actually when I started to listen,
Hmm.
because I see that a lot of people were like in my situation. Um, it's very hard for people to let go of
Yeah.
that startup, especially something that you built for a decade, you know.
Yeah, more.
Um, Everything. Like I paid probably a couple $100,000 for my degrees, 2 degrees in the
Yeah.
US. And so I was like, are you willing to give up all of that? And so a lot of people are having a really hard time to letting go of the lifestyle that they thought it would be good for them, because there's already so much investment
Hmm.
that put into the time and the effort. And so I can really understand the pressure, but like only when you hit the rock bottom, when you kind of go into the blank slate, then I think that's is then you can start like questioning and realize you can build a different foundation, and um and you can do things differently, like whether you still want to live the life that you live, or go on a different track and living a different life that is more authentic and that is more aligned to who you are, and what you really want to be and what you really want to do in the world.
Yeah, and I think you put it beautifully in the book when you talk about, building a house on sand versus building your house on rock, and having that established foundation where if you don't have that proper foundation of it's what you want to do and it feels right and it's connected to your inner being and your inner, truth, then you can keep trying to build and secure and secure and secure, but it's a shaky foundation and it's,
Yeah.
tremendously unpleasant at times. And, you're just living other people's version of you and you're not being authentic to yourself. And it's unfortunate that it sometimes does take everything being taken from you to have to realize that and be given that opportunity
Exactly. And
to change, right?
yeah, yeah. And I see that happens to a lot of people and not just me, but it's all nailed down to the choices that you make, because I see many people, it's like I have to do everything I can to going back to that old life that I wanted, you
Yeah.
know. But some other people is like, no, this is not for me anymore and I want something else different. Um so it's all really about the level of indoctrination um, and the clinging back to the life that we were taught how it's supposed to be like, and it's kind of hard to imagine it otherwise, and it's also very difficult to really face your fear when you hit that rock bottom. And I think a lot of people are avoiding that as well. And I've seen it um, from many of my friends,
Yeah.
actually. Like I've seen a lot of people who were in my situations, and they chose in a different ways that I did. So that's kind of brought me into the understanding of alchemy, because like the first phase is like is one of the hardest phase, I think, because that's how I see that happens to a lot of people. But majority of people want to hold back to like what they thought it would be, or the life that they thought it would be. And so few people that kind of want to go in a different route. And that's the reason why I wanted to share my story in this book. And I was like, hey, there's a different route, and maybe you can like sit down, listen to your heart, and feel and realize your desire. Maybe there's a different option, and it could be a much better options for you in life.
Yeah, and I think you're right, because that fear is real, right? That fear of the unknown, of going against what seems safe and normal and what everyone else is doing. And, it feels like you're taking a huge risk. And in some sense you are, but if you're following, your inner guidance and your inner voice, then as you are a perfect example of that. Like, it leads you to only beautiful places. Not that it won't be challenging at times and difficult, and you can't really get away from that, but you're at least doing it on your own path, right? And the challenges are much easier to overcome, in the sense that because you're doing it for you, right? And you trust your inner strength and your inner courage and your inner guidance, such that you're not fearful of everyone else's everything and judgments and this and that. And if you can get past that, then it's a open world and it's totally free, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, looking back then, I was like, my fear of sharing was actually my biggest fear. And after I overcome that, and I was like, I can overcome like some other fears. It's like if you already overcome these mountains, and I was like, I've done it. I can go climb other mountains. It's kind of like building up your muscles, and some other obstacles. I wouldn't say that is easier, but it's like you already have the experience at how it feels like for you to overcome a certain things. It just gives you more confidence to continue overcome other challenges in your life. And I think that's the beauty of it, and that's the beauty of alchemy that I wrote in the book, because at every stage it presents different challenges.
Mm-hmm.
But the higher you go to the upstage in the up level, not that there's no challenge, it still continue to get bigger and bigger, but like you have more tools, you have more confidence to overcome these challenges, even though it feels like really big. So that's what how to go up the ladders from there. And so in the societies, I feel like most people just keep going in circles in different stages of alchemy, because you can't really get stuck in there.
Yeah.
Like most of the time in the first stage and in the second stage, because it's so hard for us to face our fear and to have the courage overcoming it.
Yeah. So I think before we carry on, how about we just give a little overview of what alchemy is and what it means to you and how you kind of like apply it in your life, and, just like a general sense, because, historically alchemy has been looked at as like a sort of primitive science of trying to convert metals into gold, right? And the theory behind it I think it was it like the Middle Ages or the Renaissance period or something like that, where there were a bunch of scientists who basically were like, well, if everything's made up of atoms and all chemical substances are made up of, protons and neutrons and electrons, if you can add a few protons and neutrons and electrons to a metal or take some away, then you can get gold and you can be rich, right? And that was kind of how it was seen for a long time. But then I think, I don't know exactly when it started, but I know Carl Jung was a big influence in finding the sort of psychological and spiritual side of it, which uses the alchemical process of transmutation, of changing things and evolving and becoming something, beautiful and bright like gold, is used as a kind of structural output. I mean, a structural analogy for, a human's life, right? And what it means in each of the phases. So how many stages are there?
So there's 7 stages of alchemy. So the first stage is called calcination. And that's the stage, is kind of like everything burned down in the materialistic world. And then the next stage is called the dissolution. So this is the stage where you have to deal with your emotional baggage, learning about your subconscious, like everything that dealing with childhood trauma, relationship issues. So often it's going to be brought up in the dissolution stage. And the next stage is the separation. So this is the stage that is kind of like everything that is corrupted in the previous stage is now further separated. So it's further purifying. So this is the stage about like learning spirituality, learning about disengage from the material world, so you can start taking steps going into the spiritual world, learning about the spiritual world. And now at the conjunction is where, while you have already learned about the spiritual world, now it kind of like reconnect that to the earthly world. So that's kind of like the conjunction stage. And then after that is the fermentation. Now, after the reuniting of the spiritual and this is the first day of the spiritual and the earthly world. And then the fermentation is like a further refining, purifying process. Anything that is impure in the previous stage from the conjunction. And then you go into the distillation. So distillation is the next step of the purifying or refining further the impurity of whatever that you have in the metal, or like basically in yourself, to the pure stage. And now to the coagulation is the highest stage of alchemy. This is where that you can actually access the spiritual world, like whenever. So that's just like you get to be the alchemist. In the book, The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, so he explained this is where Santiago actually was able to control the weather. He could call on the wind, and he could change the weather. So that's just kind of the stage of coagulation, because you can access that spiritual world and you can bring everything that you learn from there down to earth. That's the coagulation. So it's kind of like the rejoining is similar to the conjunction, but in a higher elevation, higher vibration. So those are the stages of alchemy. Now, so the main goal of alchemy is all about transformation from transmutation. And that means refining anything that is corruptible, anything that is impure within ourselves. So lead is kind of like a heavier metal than gold, right? So that's why it's not a precious, it's gold. So it's same as us, because we carry so much indoctrination and negative beliefs when we not when we were born, but when we were raised in this society, by our culture, by our family. So those beliefs make us impure as a person. So the process of the process of alchemy is to letting go all of these baggage that we carry within ourselves. And through these stages, we learn about who we are. And so it's like the process of returning home within yourself, but in in a pure way, that along the way you get to raise your vibration as a being. But in this process of alchemy, is because alchemy is in everything, because the world and the universe is forever expanding and evolve. So is we as humans. So everything can be transmuted or can be transformed. And that's what I said in the book. The process of the caterpillar turned into a butterfly, that's the process of alchemy as well. Because it's not just like a whole big circle of transformation, but it happens in everything, even in ourselves, in our daily life. Like just like when you have when you face the situation that kind of make you upset or like trigger you, you kind of have to carry through those stages in order to resolve your current problems or circumstance in order to get to the next level, for instance.
Otherwise you get stuck.
Exactly. So it's like the process of alchemy, if you think of it, is like it's like the circle in the seed of life. Or in the flower of life. It's like the small circle within the bigger circles, but like multiple small circles that make the bigger circles. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So there's many different levels of alchemy that happens all around us. Like if you observe nature, if you observe your emotion and everything, because everything have to transmute. Because the transmutation is part of change, like because everything has to change, right? So change is the only constant, and that's why alchemy always happen like all around us. So when we are aware of this concept, then we will be able to look at everything that happened to us in a third perspective or in the higher perspective. And we don't get stuck in that victim mentality, like, oh, like everything happened to me, like poor me, you know? And so like when you understand that concept, like me, this is just very a natural process that happens to everyone and everything. Then when we look it from a different perspective, then we can ask ourselves, like, what am I supposed to learn here? Like, what can I do to change the situation and transmute this circumstance from one form to another? And that's how we grow, and that's how we transform from one being into another being. And that's how we shed all the layers on the baggage within ourselves.
Yeah. And I think it's such a beautiful framework for understanding, you know, humanity and how we change and evolve. And yeah, sorry. What's happening? No?
Okay.
1 second. All good?
She said I have to wear a mask.
Oh,
in the
really?
room.
Why?
Yeah,
It's a private room. How do they even know? They have cameras?
I don't know.
It's creepy.
And she said no drink, and I have my water bottle with me. So I have to put my mask on.
Okay. So for those who don't know, V is in a public library in Halifax. And apparently in her private room, she's being told that she must wear a mask and she's not allowed to drink because, you know, the world's a little bit crazy right now. So we'll see how this goes.
This is, I don't know if you can still hear me okay.
Yeah.
So this is kind of part of the van life, right? So I have to go to get a private room in the library to have stable Wi-Fi to do this podcast.
Yeah, but it's all good. We can still hear you. Yeah. It's so crazy. I mean, what does she want? I mean, you're in a private room. There's no one around you. Anyway, we won't fuss about it. We'll just continue. But anyway, so yeah, like I was saying, I think that, alchemy is a wonderful framework for understanding change in the world, and particularly within ourselves, because as you said, and as you mentioned in the book, like change in life is constant, right? And you can resist that change, or you can go with it and learn from it and use it as a platform to evolve and to become a better person, a better being, to be more compassionate and empathetic and, self-understanding towards yourself and, towards the rest of the world. Because when you sort of take that step back and you see things through that higher perspective of, everyone's going to go through change. And you know what change means? Change means challenge, right? Because evolution requires challenge. That's how things evolve, is you get faced up against barriers and obstacles, and you got to use your strength and use your knowledge and whatever else of the tools that you have available to you to overcome those challenges. And when you do, new things that you didn't know you had emerge out of you, right? And new skills, or you strengthen some of your already existing skills, and you become a better, a more evolved person because of it. And so I think it is a tremendous tool. And I really like the, staged approach where, and you talk about this a lot in your book, like you take us through the whole process and journey that you've been on in the framework of alchemy, and you incorporate really cool elements of tarot and of Hermeticism and, quotes from like Rumi and, other brilliant sort of spiritual thinkers or whatever you want to call them. And it just shows how, finding this alchemical process and using it as a framework to understand the experiences you've been through really helped you to understand what was going on and to be able to work through these challenges that you were faced with, which were, understandably extraordinarily difficult, without understating anything. I mean, your whole life had been uprooted because you had done this whole amazing time in the US and you felt like it was your home. And then you had this, really terrible experience at your job, even though you're highly qualified as a biomedical engineer. And, you still didn't get your green card. And then you had to move back to Vietnam and sort of start over, right? That was your rock bottom, as you said. And that's where the journey that you're on now really began, right? After several months of depression and frustration, you kind of got that insight into yourself to be like, okay, well, now I have an opportunity to reinvent what's happening, right? And then through that, you made your way to Canada. And I mean, it's a long story and it's a good read for all those who are interested. And you made your way to Canada and to travel around. And so I was just going to say, like, as you walk us through that process in your book, what I really also liked about it was that, you have these journal prompts in your book, right? Where as you explain how you went through these transformative stages, you like ask us as the reader to go through it as well, right? Which I think is very special, because that's how you show it's like, oh no, this isn't just some theoretical this or that or whatever. It's like, no, these are very practical tools. Sure, they have a spiritual or spiritual basis, but it doesn't matter because they're practical if you allow yourself to think about them that way, right? And so it is very interesting, and alchemy is a brilliant, I don't know what framework is the only word I can think of other than science. But I mean, I guess some people would object to that.
It's actually science. Well, to think of it, everything is really science, because it's kind of like, well, because it's processing, like I'm very left brain. Because I was trained as an engineer, so anything with the process and step to step is kind of like I can understand that very well. But I would like to remark another beauty of alchemy is that, like, as you pass through all of these stages. So my math's having a hard time staying on when I talk.
You don't have to worry for me. I mean, we'll see if that lady comes back and shouts at you again.
I'm just gonna have a beard.
Yeah.
So it's like like as we go through the stages, what I realize is that you have so much more peace and you feel so much more freedom within yourself. So there's less things that actually trigger you because they're already like all of that really burnt away or washed away through the previous stages. So when you go through life and when you already go through all of these challenges, you realize, life is good. Like I don't have that much that actually trigger me anymore,
Yeah.
and you feel so much happier inside as a person. So even though the challenge that you face at the current stage, it can be really big, but you feel so much more at ease knowing that you already been through so much, and like I need to continue on. And it takes a lot of commitment to go through to the later stages because we can actually easily get stuck in the middle stage and we think that we already finished, that we already get to the finish line, So that's another beauty of alchemy, understanding that this process of evolution is forever ending, is part of the universe, and universe is always ever expanding or contracting. It can go either way. So it is infinity. The process is infinity, but along the way, you will always have challenges, you will always have problems, but at the same time, you also gain so much more peace and freedom within yourself. That's what I find. I wouldn't say that I don't have challenge right now, but I can say that after going through all these stages is it's actually give me a lot more confidence, and I get the chance to practice all the tools that I learn and be more self-aware. So that's where it actually get a little bit easier, even though there are always challenges out there.
Yeah. And it's you're never getting away from challenge in life, right? Until you die, basically. It's just a matter of how you learn to deal with challenges. And, the way life seems to go is the better you get at it, the more difficult the challenges are going to be. But if you are able to view it as you've been describing, from that sort of, self understanding of I can handle this, or even if I don't know how, I know that I'll figure it out, or some, things will work out in my favor. I'll figure out what it means. I mean, even just to look at your situation, like on the one hand, you could have looked at your experience in the US as this catastrophic thing that had happened to you and ruined your life, right? And I guess there is some truth to that. But at the same time, what that really did was that was just the step before, or maybe two steps before you getting to this place now where you get to live your dream and travel the world, right? And maybe if you hadn't gone through all of that in the US, you wouldn't have done that. Maybe if things had gone okay and you didn't have to lose everything to find it, maybe you would have just had this sort of like continuous existence of like, what if, I never got to do it, I never tried. Or maybe not. I mean, it's a little hard to speculate because it could have been anything, right?
So that's what I think, the choices are so important. Just like I think our choices are actually our powers, because you can create different realities. Depends on what choice that you make. And so that's why having like an awareness changes your thoughts, because it changes the perspective. When your thoughts change, you would make different actions, and from different actions you make different choice.
And you learn.
Exactly. So that's why I think understanding the concepts of alchemy is so important and is imperative, because it helps you to look at things in a different perspective. It helps you to know that, there's actually different options for me out there, and what choice do I want to make. And the thing is, like having courage is another different topic, because like you can see, oh, this is the choice. I know
Hmm.
that this is choice, but whether do I want to go there, because it's so hard.
Yeah.
Like if I just stay in my comfort zone, it would be so much easier for me. Life would be so much easier. But then you're not gonna grow from there. You can't stay in your comfort zone, but you can grow. In order to grow, you have to get out of your comfort zone. Um, and so, but to get out of comfort zone, it requires you to trust and
Hmm.
have faith and surrender.
Yeah.
It's, so there's so many different elements there, but how can you trust if you don't know what this choice is going to lead?
Yeah.
So
That's the trust and the faith, right? Is that it will work out.
mhm, that's something that I learned so much from my nomadic life, from my
Hmm.
land life, because every day is really different. You don't like, I don't know what the weather is going to be today. I don't know where I'm going to be today.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of uncertainty. So like as you can see in this pandemic, when people face certainty, like how chaotic it is, right? Like everyone get freaked out and everyone is scared. And
Yeah.
so that's the reality of the world we live in right now, because we are all so afraid of facing the unknown, so afraid of getting out of our comfort zone to actually see the truth of what it is.
Yeah.
So in order for us to evolve as a collective, we have to get out of that place of our comfort zone and have to face a lot of uncertainty, knowing everything is going to be okay, knowing that we are going to get there. And so the way that I'm manifesting is that I just know that no matter what happens, like I'm gonna be okay.
Yeah.
So it's like having the trust is so essential when you get into that phase of uncertainty, and just surrender to it, like just let the flow push you, just go
Yeah.
and float on the river.
Yeah. Ride the river of life. Don't try and swim upstream, you know?
Yeah, exactly. So I think in a way, this van life, this nomadic life has helped me to understand so much about alchemy and spirituality as well. Um, and I feel like I kind of have this advantage more than other people for that
Hmm.
reason, in order to practice my faith, um, and to learn how to trust and knowing when to surrender.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you feel like, should I give up? So give up is different with surrender. Surrender is like, feel like, oh, I'm a lion, just let life push me wherever it needs to go. But giving up is kind of like, I don't want to do this anymore, like want to go on a different track. So um yeah, it like to like living this lifestyle has given me to understand alchemy and spirituality in a much deeper level. Haven't I gone to van life, or living this nomadic life, I don't think I would have gotten here. I don't think
Yeah.
I would get to this point. I would stay stuck in that comfort zone. I don't know. I may have still but like very depressed
Yeah.
being an engineer, like getting another office job. Um, and yeah, I don't know where life would be, but that's that's the beauty of making bold choices and living authentically.
Yeah.
And whether we have the courage to make that choice, and once we have the courage, do we have enough faith? Do we have enough trust? Can we actually surrender?
Yeah.
All of these steps that it require from you to go through the different stages of alchemy. And the thing is, like when you go through these stages, make sure that you get a lot of help. Like, I don't think anyone would be able to do that alone, for sure. Like, you're
Yeah.
gonna need a lot of coaches and mentor and guides to get you through these stages as well. And of course, from friends and family who actually understand you and can support you, because for me, I'm like a black sheep in my family.
Yeah.
No one really understands me. So it's very hard for me to kind of like explain to my family and have them to support me. They still support me in a level that they can, but to explain on this spiritual process with them, that's impossible. Like,
Yeah.
they can never get it. But they have supported me through this book. They didn't agree with me living the van life, but they now supporting me as well. You know, they don't really complain anymore about me
Yeah.
living the van life.
And if you hadn't had the courage to, go against, so to speak, what your family wanted for you, then you wouldn't be here. And, I think you're right. It takes a tremendous amount of courage, and the lifestyle that you've been living now for what, 3 years, 4 years or something like that? 5 years?
3 years and 9 months.
Yeah, it's a long time, relatively
Yeah,
speaking. But,
yeah.
you're right, because if you don't have that courage and that faith that things will be okay for you, and that trust in the universe, or in whatever it is that one trusts in, it's that, I mean, it would be perceivably be a nightmare for you, because every day you'd be like, what's going to happen tomorrow? And you'd have all this anxiety and be like, where am I going to find a place to park? And what happens if this happens? And what happens if that happens? And what am I doing about my future? And what am I going to do about retirement funds? And, all these things that like could easily derail you and take you back to the sort of normal civilized life. Like that.
Basically.
Yeah, and those are real concerns for a lot of people. And so it's not like those things aren't real, but it's like, are you prepared to take a leap of faith, right, and ride the river of life instead of trying to forge your own river and be like, I'm going to force the universe to do what I want it to do, and be tremendously disappointed when that doesn't work because
Yeah.
you can't fight rivers. It doesn't go so well for you.
So that's where the work of intuition is really helpful, like to know like when to surrender and when to trust, right? So listen to that voice. So the way that I learn is that just keep going with your passion. Like knowing what your passion is, and that's why it is the compass, right, for your life. And just keep going toward that direction. And another thing that I want to mention is that I kind of have this thought when you were talking, but so it's like when we go through these stages. So I was talking about just and surrender. Another beauty of van life is about being healed in nature. So that's a part that's been a big part for me in van life, and how it's helped me to carry through the different stages. Because have I not like go back in nature and just kind of like go retreat, like whenever I get triggered a lot, whenever I feel really stressed out or very unhappy or very angry, I go and retreat alone by myself. I stay away from other people.
It's a good move.
So that's the flexibility of van life for me. And during during that process, there's so much healing taking place, and I didn't really understand grounding. I didn't really understand so much the healing of nature. I was just kind of like doing it like naturally. And later on, I learned that when when you go into nature, and I was in BC at that time, there's so much nature in BC, you know.
Yeah.
So if you can get lost,
It's beautiful.
really in BC, there's so many beautiful places. And I just sometimes like just go soak my feet in the water, in the ocean or the lake, and just go on hikes. So later on, I realized that when I was doing that, there's a lot of healing taking place in terms of grounding, like more for us kind of just cleanse on your energy. Because like when you go soak your feet, the water actually cleans your energy and just draw on your negativity from there, and you feel really good and refreshed afterward. Um, and so I was just kind of guided intuitively going to this van life without knowing what I was facing against, or what kind of challenges like I would go into, right?
Right.
And because I just love being in nature so much, I didn't know how healing that was. I just kind of like go with my feelings. And so listen to that inner voice, that intuition. That's how it gets you to overcoming these stages.
Yeah. And if you
Yeah,
listen to it, it takes you where you need to go, right?
exactly. It leads you to where you need to be in order to be more aligned. But then if you let so many voices getting in your head, from your families, from your friends telling you you can't do this and you can't do that, it goes against your intuition.
Yeah.
So, like, in order to listen to your intuition, you need to like shut everything out and just stay quiet. Um, I didn't know that, but I kind of like intuitively doing that because I just couldn't stand everything around me anymore. Um, I couldn't stand all the judgment, everything that people was telling me. So there was a period of time, even before van life, I just shut everything out.
Yeah.
I
It's a good
really shut
move.
everything out. And I was like, what is it like I really wanted to do? Um, and so when you are able to do that, when you shut all the voices in like from the outside, on the external noise, it would be so much easier to know what is your intuition, like what is your passion, like what you want to do, what is the next step is. So that's, yeah, stay in the silence, stay in the gap, I think. And that would really help you to carry through all the challenges and getting through the stages of alchemy.
Yeah, and I think that's so important too, right? And it's not something that we sort of practice regularly in our Western civilizations because, you know, the sort of focus is on productivity and do as much as you can, and you know, never a moment of silence. And even when it's not at like a job or anything like that, I mean, you know, our phones have, you know, our attention for, you know, probably 90% plus of our free time, right? Is we're just focused on other things. And, you know, I've thought about this a lot, and I think that part of that comes from this fear of being alone with your thoughts, right? That a lot of people have, and fear because a lot of the time, you know, our thoughts are very anxious or anxiety provoking or depressing or enraging because we're holding on to so much of, you know, these judgments and fears and all these things that we sort of project onto ourselves about the future and the past. And, you know, none of it's really happening in the present moment. It's all a projection in our head. And so if you take time to sit, like, you know, as you would in meditation or by going for a walk or being in nature is the best way to do it. Then there's that fear then like, oh, I'm going to be overwhelmed by my head, right? But really, like, once you try it, you realize that, oh, actually you can kind of quieten all those voices, or at least not pay much attention to them anymore. And I think you're right, because nature does something miraculous to us that we don't quite know how to conceptualize, or at least I haven't found any way to do so, of when you're in nature, particularly when you're not around other people, right? And you're by yourself, or maybe with one other person, but you're not really talking, you're just taking in everything. You kind of get this perspective shift on yourself and on life, because when you're in a city or a town or something like that, it's so easy to get caught up thinking that the whole world is, exactly like how it is in my experience in life right now. And it's all so human focused, and, everything seems so important, and all these projects and things like that, they seem like the most important thing. And they are important. And I'm not saying that everyone must just give up everything, but what nature does is it gives you perspective of like, oh, actually the world has been here for millions of years before me, and it will be for millions of years after, and I'm just a little part of that. And it's not so serious, the things that are happening to me and to whatever is happening. I mean, it's relatively important, but it's not as important as we sort of tend to make it seem to ourselves, right? At least that's been my experience of it. And and the sort of like the vibe and the energy you get of being in nature is very different, because it's also not as like discrete and defined like cities are. Cities are very like geometric and straight lines everywhere and grids, and you can see and identify and everything. And you go into a forest and you're like, there's so much shit happening here right now. Like, I don't even know which of these things on the floor are living and which aren't. And how come there's life coming out of all these dead things? And, there's a billion different species of animals and insects and trees and plants that are all existing perfectly, And I mean, they eat each other and they do things like that. But there's a beauty about it that you don't really find in the city unless you're in a park or something like that. Right.
Yeah.
And
so I find the way that I look at it is like there's so much pollution in the city, not just, air pollution, water pollution, but energetically, there's a lot of pollution because
like mental pollution.
Exactly, the mental pollution. And so often we pick up on that because we are energetic being. And so we can be bombarded by other people's thoughts, other people's vibration. So it's a lot harder to keep your vibration high in the city. And that is my experience. Like when I go into nature, I feel so good.
Yeah.
And when I go to the city, I was like, I observe my mood, my emotion, and I was like, it goes way down like this, and it can get very quick. So I get a little bit more sensitive now with energy. So I can feel the difference very significantly. Now it's kind of hard for me to stay in nature long, like in my vein, because it's getting cold in the winter time.
Yeah.
It's not really possible because I need amenity and different facilities in the city. But yeah, that's the reason why when you go into nature, it's so healing, because it's just refreshing, and the energy is so much purer because you don't get bombarded by other people energy. And it's like, because it's refreshing, you feel like more yourself. That's what I'm finding, because it's really interesting that I had never considered myself to be a writer, but ever since I live in my vein, I go retreat in nature a lot, especially when I know that I'm somewhere secluded and remote. Words just kind of like come through me.
Wow.
Very interesting, like poems or like words just like somehow just pops out of me. And that's how I started writing poems. But I'm not like, I never thought of myself being a writer or like an aspiring writer. Honestly, I hated writing when I was in college. So you say I'm writing a book, it's still mind blowing for me to say that I actually wrote a book. But when you feel more aligned, when you feel more authentic to yourself, this is where everything just flow through you. I heard that from my coach before, but I didn't really understand what it was actually like to be aligned, right? And the healing process of nature is kind of purifying you naturally to get you become more authentic of yourself. And
Hmm.
that's why if I was just kind of came through me that way. Even though I didn't like writing, but I am now.
Yeah. Now you're a published author, you know?
Yeah, and I just and that's why I thought because I never thought of myself to be a writer, and I thought like if I was going to write, uh what helpful, like what can I actually bring it to the world? How can I actually help people? Um and that's why I incorporate a lot of questions in my
Hmm.
book. Because it's not just about my story. My story was like to help people to understand alchemy. But when they understand my story, I wanted them to actually reflect on their life journey so they can understand the process a little bit deeper and getting to know where they are in the process. Um, and so to gain better awareness about themselves, and that
Yeah.
hence the questions and the journal prompts. Um, because I didn't want to just write a book about me.
Yeah.
Like what good is it for the world, and how it can actually help people, and that's where I get the inspiration, and that's how alchemy comes to be. And it's very interesting that when I was asked to write the story about my Ben life, um it was the same time I learned about alchemy, so it's kind of meant for me to write it that way. When I draw the inspiration from,
Yeah.
that was a time that I discovered alchemy. Well, I knew about alchemists from Paulo Coelho, but I didn't really understand it until I was writing the book, which was just like about a year ago.
Mm.
Um, so it just came at the time that I was writing my book, and so I had to um changed everything, redrafted everything. I was like, this is not about van life anymore. This is going to be about alchemy.
Right. And it
And
works.
yeah, and that's how it came to be. And I thought it was just really interesting how when you become more aligned with the universe, like all the synchronicity is going to happen and just flow you through there. And so
Yeah.
it just go along with it.
Yeah. And I mean, fair enough that you don't consider yourself a writer, but you wouldn't be able to tell that from reading your book. I would have thought that, you studied writing. I mean, it's so well written, and you can feel the authenticity when reading it, right? Which I think is sometimes missing from a lot of texts where it just feels like, empty information.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, like maybe it's interesting to know kind of information, but like when as you do in your book, when you tell from your experience and you can feel the like, you can feel the emotion of you going through your journey, and you can see the transformation, and you can actually be a part of it. It's so wonderful, and it's such a nice read, and I would highly encourage everyone to get it. It's called Living Through Alchemy, and it's on Amazon and places like that, and it's definitely worth reading, and it's so special. And I'm glad that you had a great time writing it, and that it's been so helpful to you. And I hope that it helps support you in your van life for the rest of your time. I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful, right?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for saying that, because that I wanted to share that experience, because I'm like, I wanted people to understand philosophy and the concept of alchemy um, in a way that to make them feel relatable,
Hmm.
so they can visualize what alchemy is like, going through the process of alchemy, uh, and what it actually feel like and look like from my experience. And so from there, they can understand a deeper concept of alchemy and philosophy of Hermetic teaching. And I think all of this knowledge is so essential for our lives, like to get through with what we're facing right now in the
Yeah.
world, because you gotta change after the pandemic, because if you stay the way that you were, we're not going to be able to move forward, right? And that's what I'm really hoping this book can contribute to the world that way, to encourage people to step up and change, and get to understand more about alchemy, get to understand more about Hermetic teaching, and have the courage to face it and go through it, because the world really need us right now, like
Yeah.
to step up and change and be different and be more authentic, because that's the only way for us to gain freedom.
Yeah. But the truth is, I think that your book is it goes far beyond alchemy and Hermeticism. I think it's a testament to the human spirit, right? And to faith and to connectedness with yourself, with each other, and with the world and the universe. And, whether you are going to follow the principles of alchemy and Hermeticism, which, is great and would be wonderful, or you simply take the message from the book that, you need to believe in yourself and believe in the world and see the good things in life and find what's beautiful and what's meaningful to you. And, how each of us are so special and how we create our realities and how, we shouldn't get bogged down by our fears and anxieties and depressions and things like that. And that you're the pinnacle example of that, right? I mean, being a highly successful immigrant engineer, right? Working at a highly prestigious job and having all of that mean, not much to you in the grand scheme of things. I mean, what better example? And then following your intuition and your guidance of your heart to just know where to take you one step at a time, even though you didn't know where it was going. And, I'm sure there were lots of fears that came up, but you moved through that. And as we spoke about, you had that courage and, it's just, and look where you are and you're happy and you've been doing it for 3 years. And, if that's not an inspiration to people to just find their happiness in themselves, right, then what is? And I think that the alchemical process is a brilliant framework for people, for those who are interested in understanding the process of their transformation. And so I think that the joining of it was a really wonderful job. And I'm so happy to have been able to have you on the podcast today to share your story. And there's so much more we could go into. I mean, your dog, your wonderful Marco, and what it's like living in a van.
Talking about him, yeah.
Yeah.
Can I have just a few more minutes?
Sure. Yeah, please.
So if you read the book and you already know that, so in the book it's kind of like an open ending, and that's what I want to clarify. Because yes, I didn't finish like all the stages of alchemy because it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
But the message behind that is that you don't have to do everything so perfectly in order to share the work with the world, but you can share whatever that you know and whatever that you have, in order to help other people behind you. And so I hope that people can see the perfection in the imperfection, because for me, it is the living stages. I'm still going through it. And the reason why I didn't put everything in the book is because I may have different perspective and high perspective in every different stage I go through. So I didn't want to corrupt the ideas, or if that's the stage I'm going through right now, I may not have like a higher view of the lessons I'm learning yet. And so, yeah, the authenticity for me is the most important thing in this book. I have to share exactly everything that I experienced, because if I haven't experienced it, I cannot exactly explain it or share it in the most authentic way. And that's why it's an open ending, and that means there may be a second book.
Yeah, I hope so. You know, in a few years
And
when things have progressed and you've moved through more stages, and or maybe, you know, some stages repeat, and you get to be an example of that for people, of how it doesn't work out perfectly. And, you know,
yeah.
if you fail, which is not really failing at any
Mhm.
point, it's just a little detour that you need to take,
Yeah,
right?
everything is the lessons, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And there's no real wrong move.
No, no, it's like I think like, yeah, like you said, there's no failings. Like is you failing these lessons, and that's you gain the wisdom from the lessons, so from failures. So
Yeah.
it's
And
part it's part of the process.
yeah, and life doesn't give up on you, right?
Yeah.
Like I heard Esther Hicks give this analogy of, you know, when you program a destination into your GPS and you follow the route a little bit, so you're following your inner guidance is the sort of analogy, and then, you know, you take a turn that wasn't scheduled. Your GPS doesn't go, oh, that's it, it's over now, you suck, everything sucks, that you're dumb, and you might as well give up your journey. No, it just recalibrates and recalculates the route, and you'll get there anyway. And you can do it
Yeah.
1,000 times,
Yeah.
and you'll still get there. It might take you a little bit longer, but that's okay. I mean, what do we have if not time, right?
Yeah.
And so,
Well, that's how we're all going home. We're all going to the same place. It's
yeah,
just in different
exactly.
ways. That's why I think everyone has different experiences. That's why I cannot say like one size fit all, like one process of alchemy is going to fit all for everyone. But yeah,
Yeah,
like when you understand it and like can visualize it and understand what it actually feels like and looks like you can apply it to your life.
yeah. And
Yeah.
do you have a plan now for the next few months where you're going to be spending your time? Not exactly, but just, you know, are you going to be traveling more, or are you
I
hampering down for the
find
winter somewhere?
No, I have to anchor down in the winter because this winter I heard it's going to be pretty tough. So I would have to rent a place. So I'm looking to move in a new place for like a couple months.
Hmm.
Until everything fall out, then I'm going to be back in my van again and hopefully going to be a new adventure. But until then, there's going to be a lot of prep work for the book, and I don't know what it was gonna come. So I'm kind of like an
Yeah,
open book, whatever inspires me at the moment and what I feel like doing.
yeah,
So I always keep myself open.
that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
yeah.
Well, listen, thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I wish you nothing but success on your journey. Not that you need it, as you know, it's going tremendously well, but you know, I hope your book does super well, and I'm sure it'll inspire everyone who reads it. I will put links to links to the book in the description and on all my sites. And how can people follow you on social media? I know that, you know, you post a fortune of beautiful stuff.
When you're in here, so just keep your mask on, okay? Okay. 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 I I
Oh,
have to remind me again about wearing a mask. I have
the
to wear a mask for
grouch,
this
the grouch librarian is back. Wear your mask while you're alone inside.
one.
Crazy.
Okay. And there's no one 6 feet around me within 6 feet distance.
It's yeah.
So where
Wait.
people can find me, so I have a website. So the website is mainly for my book. It's called livingthroughalchemy.com. So people can go in there to learn about the book and also download the first chapter of the book as well, which is for free.
Hmm.
And they can find my social media contacts there. Mostly active in Instagram and YouTube.
Great.
So I do have a YouTube channel that I talk a little bit about my van life, my personal growth, and Instagram is where I share inspiration from nature, like landscape photos, travel videos. Just yeah, the That's just my hangout place on Instagram mostly, and so I'm trying to be more active on YouTube by posting more videos. But those are my
Yeah.
two places that people can find me and keep up with my journey of going through the process of alchemy. Yeah.
What's your Instagram handle?
So my Instagram is called
Okay.
SmileyVV05, that's smiley face.
Nice.
And my YouTube is Personal Growth Through Van Life. And my website is livingthroughalchemy.com.
All right. Awesome. Well, I hope to have you on again soon. And if you're ever in Toronto, please give me a call, and I would love to hang out.
Yeah, I might go to Toronto next year and I will let you know.
Sounds good. All right.
Thank you for having me here, Shan. It has been my pleasure talking to you and sharing this conversation. I love it.
It's been wonderful. Thank you for coming. Vivi Tai, everybody. Take care.
Okay.